This week, Koom talks to Ho-Chi Anderson, creator of I Want to Be Your Dog, King, a Martin Luther King bio in comics form, and his latest, Godhead, which he discusses in the interview. Also, why does he identify himself as a failed comics creator, even though he's had books published by Fantagraphics? Was Anderson hobbled by not going to art school? How did Frank Miller manage to succeed despite making his developmental mistakes publicly? All this and more. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for keeping this show going. Join them at patreon.com/deconcomics. If Patreon isn't in your budget, you can also send a one-time donation of any amount via PayPal to donate@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics.
Okay, this is Koom for Deconstructing Comics, and I'm here with
Ho-Chi Anderson.
All right, so just for the listeners, we should start off maybe just saying a little bit about your career in comics, because some people might not have heard of you, and so where's like an entry point for them?
I would say...
he just mimicked tearing up his comics.
These are rough. These are unreadable. This is unreadable to me. This is unreadable to me. This is unreadable. I could never go back and read these comics.
80% of the stuff I read for the interview
is for me is unreadable. That's okay. I'm sorry. So what was the question? You distracted me by this.
If you could kind of give people an entry point to yourself as a comics person, like what would you say about yourself?
I am a failed comic book artist from Toronto. Been in the business for 28 years and hasn't exactly worked out the way I envisioned it, but still in the game to some extent.
I was very honest. It's funny because I was thinking about this and I didn't know if I could bring it up, but when I was at that Fantagraphics dinner thing that you invited me to,
Right.
I overheard you asking Jaime Hernandez about tips on how to make it.
Right.
And Jaime very kind of, I don't know, non-expansively said, "You've already made it, man." So, yeah, like, I don't know, do you kind of say that often to people? Or?
It's the truth, man. It's the truth. I've been doing this for 28 years, and every time I've pitched an idea to a company, it's always been no. Every time I've tried to advance beyond my indie roots, it's always been barrier after barrier thrown against me. So I've had some success in that. I've had some books published, and some folks know my name and some of my work, and I've got a tiny bit of a rep, but in terms of actual success in comic books, it's non-existent. So I consider that failure, man. My goal was to become a DC Comics contract artist, writer. Get anywhere near that, man. Even up until a few months ago, it was still the same story that it's been for the last 20 years. So I consider that failure.
I don't know. I'd love to be in your position because you've had this pipeline to Fantagraphics since you were like, what, 18 or 19 or something?
Yeah.
And I know it's not easy producing graphic novels, but at least you have that door kind of slightly open.
Absolutely.
And you've done all these interesting things, like you've made short films, you've worked in advertising. You know, I teach high school to pay the bills.
Right.
So to me, it feels like you're successful in that at least you're getting to ply your hand at things that you like.
Absolutely. I got to be a practitioner of a craft that I love very much. So in that
and live
sense,
off of that.
Yeah, well, no, that's not true though. I have to have done pretty much everything else to make a living. Comic books don't pay the bills, man.
I know, but the short films, and
the
advertising work.
I've done fine, but it's never been from what I set out to do. It's always the work that I've done in comic books has always translated into work outside the field. And I've always been welcomed into these other worlds, but I just always have found it strange that the thing that I love the most and wanted to be and set out to be a part of, the ramparts have always been put up against me in terms of any advancement beyond a certain level in that. So I don't know, whatever. The world doesn't know anybody a career, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I just for me personally, I'm a little.
No, I share your feelings, not exactly in the same way, but about other things. So that's of interest to me. But let me ask you, if you could go back and do X, Y, Z differently, what would you do, knowing what you know now?
I will tell you exactly what I would do differently. There were three instances in my career early in my career where I was, I think, too cavalier, too arrogant, and just too lazy, and I blew those three opportunities. And I didn't see it at the time, but I see it very clearly now, and it's affected the decisions I've made since then. And I think for the benefit, so I'm sort of grateful for them. But to be more specific, early in my career, I got a great opportunity to work with. They no longer exist, but there was a. Are you familiar? You remember Piranha Press from like
Totally.
early '90s?
Yeah, sometimes Piranha Press is one of the things I thought about when I look at your stuff. I mean, you told me about the Howard Chaykin influence, and I can see
Yes.
that, but I can also see like Mark Hempel and some
yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah, I
which,
love that Mark Hempel. For
Yeah,
sure.
I remember from Piranha.
Well, I love Piranha, and at that time I was on the periphery of DC. I was sort of getting like a little bit of nibbles from them, and so this is around the time that Piranha Press and Milestone were starting out, and I got involved with I was going to illustrate a 6-issue story called Skin Brace, which was written by Lou Stathis. If you're not familiar with Lou Stathis, check him out. He's a fascinating guy. And used to work for High Times and Heavy Metal. And interesting figure in comic book history. I think he landed at Vertigo later in his career. At any rate, so it was written by him and a guy named Robert Morales. And this would have been a great opportunity for a young cartoonist. And I should have been more grateful for the job, but I just had an attitude like I wasn't totally thrilled by what we were going to be working on, but that shouldn't matter. You're there to service a client and
For
practice a
Piranha?
craft for Piranha Press.
Yeah.
And this was a great opportunity, and I should have gotten out of my own way and out of my own ass and done the work properly. But I was so cavalier about it, and finally they were like, "Take a walk, buddy." Well deserved on my part. I
Did
should
you
have been fired.
object to the actual content and say you got to change this and that?
No, not at all. I just wasn't enthused about it, and I was not.
Producing.
I was not political about expressing my lack of enthusiasm. I should have just taken the job, been grateful for the job, and done the work and shut the fuck up. But instead, I was like, can't wait till this is done. God, this job's gonna be a pain in the ass. Openly saying this to the creators. Who does that? An idiot. That's who does
How
that.
old were you at that time?
19.
19.
I was 19.
And so there were two more things that you.
So the next one was a job an opportunity to pitch a story to Vertigo, and the lady who ran Vertigo at the time was Shelley Roberg. She was one of the editors, and I had known her from Kimiko when I was starting out, and so we had a connection. We were very friendly with each other. And at any rate, she asked me to like explain why the story I was pitching was different from some other stuff that was current at that time. And instead of just playing along and just expressing it, which would have been a benefit to myself because it would have clarified for myself what my story was, I kind of was a little offended that she was making me jump through that hoop. And I expressed a bit of anger in a letter. Just, again, arrogance of youth. And she was like, sorry, I don't need that shit. So she told me to take a walk. Again, well deserved on my part. I deserve to be whatever, pushed to the side. And then the third one was I did a job for.
And how old were you that time?
I was about 23, I
Okay,
think.
so it's about
Still a
20
young
years.
guy. Yeah, 20, however many years ago, 25, whatever it was, and 25 years ago, something like that. And the third one was I did a job for Milestone. Around the same time as a few years. Actually, no, it was about 20. I was around the same time. Actually, I was pitching the thing to Vertigo. I was like 22 or 23. I did.
Is this connected
did
to
Milestone.
Wise Son or not?
Yeah, it was totally Wise Son. I did Wise Son, and I was very enthusiastic
So this
about
was
that job.
96?
So, yeah, 96, 95, 96. I did it, I think, 2 years before it came out. So it'd been sitting on a shelf for a while. I think they were going through some issues.
Once
at
again, this is
Milestone.
Wise Son.
This is Wise Son, yes.
And from what I can tell, I don't really know anything about Milestone, but it looks like they were a subsidiary of DC.
Well, don't say that to them, man. I made that mistake once myself, and Dwayne McDuffie gave me what for it. But what happened is they were their own company, but they were made up of dudes who were like, they were a little bit like the black version of Image in a way, but without the rebellion so much. They were like creators of color who had come out of, I think, predominantly DC, but also Marvel as well. like bigwigs like Dennis Cowan.
DJ Chichester.
Yep, exactly. He worked
I
with
didn't even
Marvel
know he
DC.
was black.
He is. I did not know that either until right this moment, dude.
No, I'm not sure he is. I'm just saying.
Okay.
You said they were people of color.
Predominantly, but not exclusively.
Yeah. Okay, because I had a feeling he wasn't.
I don't think he was either.
Yeah.
But no, but it was largely people of color who started it up because they wanted to kind of expand what comic books could be in the 90s, which was pretty much exclusively white.
Right.
So Dennis Cowan, Dwayne McDuffie, Jackie Ching, a bunch of really talented people at the time who got together, created this company, and then got distribution through DC. Right. So that's why they kind of got the tag that they were part of DC, but they weren't. They were their own. They had their own editorial board and blah blah blah. So at any rate,
because they had the DC house ads.
Absolutely, they were definitely affiliated with DC, but they were not DC.
Gotcha.
And if you made that mistake,
I got you.
You don't want to make that mistake.
They're not existent anymore.
They are existent, man.
Really?
They came back recently. Yeah, DC's a thing again, dude. Or DC's a thing. Milestone is still a thing.
Kind of like Valiant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Joe Savage, who's running Valiant, who's like the big wig at Valiant, he was like one of the early editors at Milestone. Milestone, somebody needs to write a Milestone book, dude.
Yeah.
Like, Milestone story is fascinating. At any rate, so I did a book for them, did Wise Son for them, and I was enthusiastic about it, but at a certain point, I just got lazy about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was working on King and had some other opportunities to me, and I was just lazy. So when I look at that book, one of the reasons it's unreadable to me is because I all I see is me just like wanting to go to a party that night. You know, I just want to like smoke up and I get this page done, man, because we're hitting the clubs in like 2 hours.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to like look at.
It's funny that you say that because that's a common element among those 3 episodes. But Wyson is all about, like I would say, it's 80% about this guy who can't sort of get his head out of his own ass.
Yeah, that's me.
So
it's an autobiography, in other words. It's pretty sad.
Yeah, you said you found it unreadable.
Yes.
Can we kind of break down why?
Sure. I find all of my early work unreadable.
So what's early work for you? It's before what?
I find everything I did up until the 2nd volume of King in 2002 to be unreadable work.
Okay, including the 1st volume.
Oh, God. The 1st volume's horrible.
But that's what I would say has given you the most press.
Yeah, I think the book overall, it's a flawed piece of work at its best. But I think it's okay. Like, and I'm proud of it overall. But it's just, some people are amazing out of the gate. And I had a lot of potential out of the gate, but I mistook potential for actual skill. And so I coasted a lot of the time when I should have been working harder.
Right.
And so that early work for me is, and also you go through phases when you're trying to figure out your craft when you're young. And I was trying to figure it out on the page in front of everybody. So there's a lot of mistakes that I made. For example, something like the 1st volume of King. I was really, when I was writing that, I was really inspired by David Mamet and the great American playwright David Mamet. And he has a particular style of writing that works for him, where he includes all the stutters and the tics of human speech and the repetitions and all that. Works perfectly in David Mamet's, in his land. But when I tried to replicate that, oh, dude, it did not work. It was just, I tried to reread one of those pages and it would be just painful. What are you doing? Stop with the affectation and get to the meat of the thing. So when I look back on that stuff, it's just all those growing pains are very evident. And so
I don't mind those affectations personally because it's got a certain kind of grit and character. Like even your Eros comic, I Want to Be Your Dog. I was expecting it to be pornographic, but it wasn't really to me. It was a very gritty drama.
Yeah.
That involved sex,
right.
And even the sex wasn't as copious as you might expect from that line.
Well, the reason for that is because I wanted to. That was my first comic, and I wanted to tell an actual story.
You mean your first Eros comic?
My first comic. That was the first one I ever wrote and drew by myself. I don't need.
That was before Young Hoods in Love.
Way before Young Hoods. Yeah.
Oh wow.
The first one I did, the very first comic I did, sort of go off on a tangent. The very first one I did was a Grendel offshoot. And it was like a Grendel short story. It was the first thing that came out. And then right after that was Dog. And was a point I was making. But anyway, yeah, that was
I don't
really
think it's
stuff.
your worst comic. I mean, I think there are some storytelling problems with it.
Sure.
And what I was trying to say was I don't mind the affectations. I don't mind the Mamet influence or what I thought of as sort of like a 70s kind of realism,
Definitely.
kind of slice
That
of
was
life.
absolutely in there.
And yeah, and I love that. The only thing is there was just certain things like just basic storytelling, setting up this context,
100%.
building up a character and
Yes.
stuff that I just felt like you
Didn't
could
have
done
that
a lot more.
craft. Didn't have the craft.
Yeah, and then I guess you didn't see it at the time. I don't know.
Didn't see it. And also, that's not what I was very influenced by the American indie film of the 1990s and the late 80s, or mid to late 80s, and also what was going on I'm very influenced by American cinema, and also what was going on in American cinema in the 1970s. All right, so I was
My favorite person. You see the
I can
blue
see, I can
colors.
see that, yeah, for sure. So we're coming from the same place.
Yeah.
And I loved how those stories were not conventional. They weren't always about trying to. They were conventional in the sense that they were about setup and payoff, but they were coming from very unconventional places and tapping into a kind of avant-garde storytelling that wasn't about just traditional plotting, and I really liked that, because it felt real, it felt true,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about. You get a fucking taxi driver on your.
I think it's the best stuff because it's also it's a real method, kind of expression of like feelings, which I think you go for as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's like I always had this theory that like the relationship between film and comics was like things that happened in film would happen 10 years later in comics. And so I could kind of see you as coming in at the late 80s as kind of like the tail end of that cusp,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
But I didn't have the skills that those guys had.
Right.
I just had an appreciation for what they were doing.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, there's certain preoccupations you come back to again and again. I wanted to ask you how much of like what you depict was actually coming from experience and how much you were just fascinated with, because like yourself, I grew up in Scarborough, and Scarborough later became kind of known for this gun crime-ridden
Right.
place, this kind of seedy place, but I didn't really experience that myself. If it was there, I was very much on the fringes of that.
No,
if anything.
for me too. No, when I was coming up, Scarborough for me was idyllic, but I was fascinated
Yeah,
by crime.
suburban.
And it wasn't until I moved like into the city that I started to like come face to face with guns and the kind of violence that I would see in the films that I.
So you actually had experiences in Toronto before you did your work?
I would say around the time that I started, it was around the time that the idyllic nature of Scarborough was starting to elude me. It was starting to go away, and I was starting to see more of what the real world was like, not the sheltered, kind of enclave that my part of Scarborough was when I was growing up. But when I was growing up, man, that shit was going on, but I was sheltered from it, man. I was in a very kind of sweet environment, which I loved and miss.
Then I guess I got to ask you, how did you come to your preoccupations? Because you're writing at a time. I mean, now, everything from The Wire to X number of like movies plus, rap, it depicts the kind of life and the kind of concerns you're broaching. But back then, except for maybe in Living Color and a couple of other things, a few movies like maybe, Boys in the Hood or stuff like that, you didn't really get a lot of engagement with the kind of the black culture, the black neighborhoods, the struggle to kind of get out of a cycle of, I don't know, abuse and all of that kind of stuff. But yet you kind of deal with that. So where are you getting that from?
I don't know. I guess just from my parents. Like even though I grew up in Scarborough, my father specifically was very politically minded and very politically active, and very just aware of what was going on in the world, and was going on in the black community in Canada, in the United States, in England, in Jamaica, where he was from. So he always had his eyes directed towards. I was interested in fantasy as a child, and my father was interested in the truth, and that's what we talked about around the house. And our house was the house that always had newspapers around, and always had the news going, and always had my father espousing political thought. So it was just in the air at home. You know what I mean? To kind of have our eyes a little bit open. So.
And then,
Yeah.
were you close to your dad? Did you get a lot from him in those discussions? Did you go out to protest? Were you politically active?
I wouldn't go out to protest, but I would definitely go out to like listen to my father. I would listen to my father. I would go out with my father when he would like attend like speeches. Like that was kind of his thing.
Mm-hmm. Speeches by whom?
I couldn't tell you now. Like academic, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Local politicians, academics of the day,
Sure.
of like the late 70s, that era,
Sure.
mid to late 70s. So he was, and he was a student at York University, and I think he might have worked there for a while. So he was like very academically minded.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like stuff that was going on at York during that era that I would like kind of just be there with him while it was going down. So that kind of stuff sort of gets in your blood. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you're named Ho Chi. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, Ho Chi Minh is not thought of as a saint.
Fuck, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, man. Those are both revolutionaries, man. They're both revolutionary-minded people. I'm sure a lot of people see Ho Chi Minh as the enemy, but you know.
Well, I was just reading a graphic novel by this guy called Clement Balou, who's a Vietnamese descendant living in France, and he kind of goes around talking to people just about their experiences during the war.
Right.
And one of the guys he talks to was in Saigon after Saigon fell, and like the stuff he went through in their kind of repatriation camps
Right.
and stuff. And once again, it's not about Ho Chi Minh specifically, but that regime
Right.
was not an easy one.
Absolutely not, man.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not an expert on Ho Chi Minh or Che Guevara,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to speak to the nuances of what
Sure.
they were about. But just in terms of them being like overt political figures, I'm okay with.
But I just want sometimes people feel stamped by their name or whatever.
I feel like that to a certain extent. I feel like a certain.
Yeah.
I feel like a certain obligation, to be honest with you, to live up to that legacy. But I'm not
Okay.
of that same ilk at all.
Okay.
So that's kind of an unfair burden on my part, but still one that I seem to take on for some reason.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a cool thing too, I think, because it certainly makes people remember your name.
Yeah,
And
there's
then
that.
if you're a political writer, then it. Anyway,
I admire Che Guevara very much, just for the fact that he was.
he's a cool guy.
He was a cool guy. He's like he was a doctor. He could have led a cushy life, and he chose to kind of live up in the hills and take
Yeah.
on Batista and all that shit. And it's a little bit of a white savior, to be honest. But I have admiration for Che Guevara.
Yeah.
So
Now, if I can come back to I Want to Be Your Dog,
sure.
there is something in the drama that, even though despite the flaws you talk about, I find very compelling. You have this character Mary, and she sort of ruins the life of this guy, this young guy who's a bit naive called Damien, who's kind of innocent. And then at the same time, you find out later her life is being ruined by this guy called Zal, and she can't really get out from under him. And so it's this kind of turgid drama where things go to bad ends. But like that must have been intentional, like that kind of structure for the book. At least I feel like there's something there that if you could have, shaped a little bit better, would have been extremely compelling.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? I mean, that's not coming from your dad, right? That
No.
insight into Black lives and the way people are, and it's not just Black people who are like that, but I think you're talking about power and it kind of breaking people down in Black communities.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about that.
I'm talking about I'm just talking about the way, in a sense, the way power corrupts in general.
Right.
I haven't thought about this book in such a long time. It's kind of hard to. It's weird to sort of go back and think about it.
Well, when you did it, I presume you were contacted by Fantagraphics or Gary Goff.
Yes.
And you want to do something for Eros.
Yeah.
And then it seems like you kind of subverted that. You said yes, but you decided to focus on stuff that was important to you rather than produce porn.
Yeah. Well, I like porn. I would have been happy to do a pure porn book, but it didn't come out that way.
It doesn't feel like porn at all.
It's more of a kind of a salacious drama, exploitation drama, than like a pure porn comic book, in my opinion.
Doesn't even feel like exploitation.
No.
Like when I watch exploitation, part of me turns my brain off and I'm like, let me just enjoy the
Right.
the whatever, the sex and the violence and whatever. in the sense of like broad righteousness.
Right.
But here, I felt like I was really like following those characters
Interesting.
and trying to like hold on to them.
Right.
And so I felt like you must have been invested in them.
No, totally. I mean, a little bit it was based a little bit on stuff that was going on in my life at that point.
Okay. So it was kind of autobiographical.
To some extent, yeah. I had broken up with a woman she was like not the first girl. She was like, I'm trying to think where she fell on the chain of my romances over the years. But anyway, I'd broken up with, she was a very early romance and a very strong early love affair. And she dumped me out of nowhere. So, and I think I was fascinated at the time by the power that she had over me, that she could just sort of casually dismiss me, and yet she could go on so easily with her life, and I was just in my room bawling like a fucking idiot.
Everybody has something like that when they're young.
Everybody's got that in their life, but it was, I think at the time that I was working on the story, that was particularly fresh in my psyche at that point.
Absolutely.
So I'm pretty sure that's, again, I haven't thought about dog in a long time, so I'm trying to reconstruct the past.
Are more about power than
absolutely.
Truly about
so
love.
I think I was trying to just examine that from different aspects and try to understand where that comes from, because unless you're a total psychopath, most people don't tend to exert cruelty over their closest loved ones and confidants unless they're a total psychopath, or unless they've got some modeling of that in their past. You know what I mean? Like their father was an asshole or whatever. So I think I was just trying to understand how somebody who was so cavalier in their cruelty, where did that come from exactly? I think that's what was going on in my mind like 20 years ago.
Well, as someone who's kind of drawn on some of the things that have happened to me too when I write, did it help you process that?
That's a great question.
Or gain any further understanding of it?
It might have helped me gain a little insight, and it might have helped me exercise a demon or two. Yeah, it probably was somewhat therapeutic at the time. It's tough to say, because I don't think... You never come to a point where whatever issue you're going through is really resolved. It always sort of transmutes into something else, but it's always there, basically. You never sort of get over, in my opinion, you never sort of get over whatever the things were that drive you. So I don't know that it like put any demons to rest. It might have sated them for time, and then they sort of moved on to like the next project.
Did you ever think of showing the book to her, or?
I think I might have given her a copy.
Did you ever hear back?
Well, we're still friends.
You're still in touch.
Yeah, we're gonna have a drink next week, as a matter of fact. So
you should ask her about it.
I should.
Did you recognize yourself at this work? What you did to me?
I mean, her name was Mary, and her name's Mary in the book, and her sister's name was Maureen, and her sister's name was Maureen in the book. So she probably figured it out.
No, I kind of felt like that Mary template or that Mary archetype pops up more than once in your work.
Probably.
Like, if you look at like the way she's drawn, the freckles, the glasses, the curves, Lark in Wise Son is kind of similar.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you have a character called Hildegard in Wise Son, like you do in...
Is there another Hildegard in Wise Son, too?
Yeah.
Really? Oh, shit.
Yeah, I feel like his cousin's called Hildegard.
Oh, with the glasses?
Yeah.
Is her name Hildegard?
You should double check, but...
Well, let's take a look. I think I know the character you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I like the name. Whatever that's worth. This character here, is this Hildegard? I haven't read this in 20 years, dude.
You should take a look and double check.
I don't know what... Hildegard! Oh my god.
It is, right? Yeah.
I used that name twice. I didn't realize that until now.
But my point is, like, you sort of have these two kind of female types. You have the tall, short-haired, kind of flat top almost, and then you got the curly-haired, glasses, freckles, curves. And then I see that pop up again and again.
Yeah, at the time I've drawn my partner, Diane, who died last year. I've drawn her many times over the years. She was a real muse for me. And I drew my ex, Susan. I've drawn her many times over the years. She's Lark basically, except minus she didn't have dreads, she had short hair. But I was also, around the time I was working on Dog, Mary is based on Cree Summer. Do you know Cree Summer?
Actress?
Cree Summer was this beautiful actress. She was in a show called A Different World, which you can find on Netflix. You can also find it on TV now. I think it's still playing on TV, like in reruns today. And it was an offshoot of The Cosby Show. All right, so Denise, Cosby's daughter, went off to college, to like a Howard University style college in the South. And so the spinoff was about her adventures in college. So Denise got shit canned like 1 year into after one season. What was the actress's name? I cannot come up with her name.
Famous.
Absolutely beautiful woman, talented actress. I cannot come up with her name all of a sudden. But anyway, she got shit canned after a year. And then it went on after that for like 5-6 years. At any rate, I had a huge crush on Cree Summer, who was one of the supporting characters in it. Oh, man. And so I kind of based Mary on her a little bit. But yeah, I do have types. I definitely do have a type. My ex Susan was like, she was totally like one of my fantasy women come to life.
Well, I feel like Temple Duncan might have kind of fit the Mary mold a little bit.
Sure. I'm sure. It came from the same mind. I'm sure that it did.
Yeah.
For sure.
Coming up, going to art school versus making your mistakes in public, Frank Miller style. And Anderson talks about his most recent series, Godhead. If any of these works by Ho Chi Anderson sound interesting, you can help this podcast by buying them or anything else from Amazon. Just go to deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
This is an imaginary podcast, which may never have happened.
The Shortbox Showcase.
But then again may have. About a father and daughter. I'm Professor Allen.
And I'm Emily.
Who came from Ohio and talked about comics.
Walking Dead.
Tintin.
Black Lightning.
White Tiger. It tells of their rise to glory, when the great guests were yet to be booked.
Let's put it this way, Shogun Warriors wasn't going to win any Eisners.
And the great feats of editing not yet performed.
This is Ultra 7, this is Ultraman Jack, and this Ultraman Taro, and this Ultraman Leo, and this
of how they spoke at length.
This continuity is really the brainchild of nitpicking nerds the world over.
But to be fair, the best kind of confession is the Force confession.
And reviewed in brief tales that explore creatively the bounds of a given character's history.
Red Sun is wonderful with a very strange ending.
Of brilliant creators before their fall from grace. This is the era where Miller is at the height of his creative and artistic powers, and the ability of strong writing to encapsulate and transcend its time.
Flash of Two Earths by Gardner Fox.
This is an imaginary podcast. Aren't they all? Shortbox Showcase is part of the Relatively Geeky family of podcasts. Check us out on the web at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search in iTunes for Relatively Geeky or Shortbox Showcase. And remember, we're not experts.
We're just family.
How did you develop your drawing skills or your style?
Just practice.
You didn't end up going to art school like a lot of cartoonists.
No, I took art lessons in high school, which is where I learned perspective, which is like the best art lesson I ever learned, and a little bit of painting in high school, but not too much. But other than high school art lessons, if you have an obsession, you just tend to follow that obsession. When I was a teenager, women were not interested in me, so I had a lot of time to draw. So for a number of years, that's pretty much all I did. It was just in my room, from let's say 16 to 19, 16 to 19, 16 to 18. I was in my room constantly. I went out. I wasn't one of those guys.
What were you drawing?
I was in my room drawing constantly, dude. That's all I did.
But you weren't drawing life models.
No, I was stealing from other cartoonists.
So were you copying out of comics?
I was copying a lot of comics. I was copying a lot of Howard Chaykin. I was copying a lot of Frank Miller. copying a lot of Kyle Baker, Bill Sienkiewicz, all my heroes. I was copying the fuck out of those guys. And but I also like to draw from like fashion magazines. Just something about the aesthetic of 1980s fashion magazines that I appreciated a lot. There was a sort of cutting edge avant-garde quality to it that I really enjoyed. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. And I don't know, man, I'm just a good drawer, goddammit.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people who's just, I had a certain skill and I had the time to like practice it and cultivate it. So I came out as a pretty good artist, I think.
That actress we're trying to remember, it's Lisa Bonet.
Lisa Bonet!
Yeah.
God, how could I have forgotten
It
that?
took me so long.
Thank you.
It's about memory in the 40s. It's like you have to swim through
I know.
like a turgid like sea to get to whatever.
Well said. Yeah, that's exactly true.
But what made you want to become a cartoonist or a comic?
That's one of those things where you don't have any choice in the matter, man.
Like you just knew from like your earliest memories?
It's not even that. It's what I was doing. It's
Yeah.
just what I did. You know what I mean? I never had a moment where I thought I'm going to be an artist. I was just always drawing, or I'm going to be a writer. I was just always doing it. So it was just, I don't ever remember a time where I said, this is what I'm going to do with my life. It just was. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm sure there probably was a moment where I announced to my parents, blah, 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 but I feel like that decision had been made from birth, man. It wasn't anything I had anything to do with. And trust me, I have tried to avoid that destiny because it has not always paid off to my satisfaction.
No, you don't seem all
Yeah.
happy with it.
I'm happier now than I have been in a long ass time, but it's been 28 years of struggle and doubt and pain, to be perfectly honest with
You're
you.
lucky in that, like some of the mistakes you made were done at such an early age because you
Yes.
got in at such an early age.
Yes, sir.
But maybe that is also what's hobbled you. I mean, it's hard to say, but like because many people have gone to art school first and have made their mistakes in art school.
Yes.
You didn't have that soft landing
That is true.
pad,
That is
right?
true. And I lacked the great skill of somebody like Frank Miller, who was so young and made his mistakes very early in his career in public, but was so just naturally gifted that he was able to transcend them.
Yeah, he was.
I didn't have that.
He was so naturally gifted that he sort of supernovaed in his 20s and early 30s.
Absolutely.
And now it's like people are just hoping he can get back some of that.
Well, you know what? He's never going to get that back
He's
because he
not.
did that, but he's still Frank Miller, and I think
And
his
he
work
has
is
that
always,
glory from.
He's got that glory, and people like me are always going to be curious about what the next Frank Miller
Yeah, and me too.
book is going to be.
But I think part of the genius of Frank Miller was like, you know, he used to get ripped apart by Neil Adams, right, in the
Right.
studio.
Yes.
And part of his genius was saying, I'm not going to be Neil Adams. I'm not going to be Jim Aparo or whatever. Let me bring all of my intelligence and my passion to the storytelling.
Yes, sir.
And then some of that design stuff that he did even early on, you just look at those pages.
Yeah, man.
And he's just got such a natural, beautiful instinct for
He's
timing.
incredible. And
Yeah.
what I love
And
about Frank
writing
Miller,
too.
he's got the whole package. And what I love about him is he's one of those artists who is absolutely influenced by other artists and writers and wears his influences on his sleeve. And yet, despite his very obvious influences, it always is Frank Miller. You know, it's always Frank Miller. Like, even when he's ripping, like when I'm right now.
Yeah.
I got the artist edition of Ronin, which is like a seminal book for me. All right,
Me
so
too.
I've been basking in fucking
Yeah.
these massive reproductions of the original art of Ronin.
I gotta get
loving
that
it,
at some point.
dude. Next time I see you, I'm gonna bring that shit over. Although it weighs like 20 pounds, but the point I'm trying to make is I forgot the point I was trying to make. But he's the point is even when he's like totally ripping off Mobius or totally ripping off Bill Sienkiewicz or the artist, I forget the guy who did Lone Wolf and Cub, all those guys, ripping them the fuck off. Totally Frank Miller, man.
Yeah.
Like the themes are Frank Miller, the design's Frank Miller, the feel is Frank Miller. You know what I mean? The guy just had it.
Such a strong sense of self.
The dude,
and
exactly.
also the other thing I don't think he gets enough credit for in that period is really knowing how to work with collaborators. Because there's that like period in like '86 where he's working on Dark Knight with you know Jansen and Varley, and then he's working on Electra Lives Again with Sienkiewicz.
Yeah.
And you know he rewrote that stuff once he saw Sienkiewicz's art.
Absolutely.
He accommodated Sienkiewicz's
him,
art.
man. Yes.
And
Same thing with Hard Boiled when he was working with Jeff Darrow. Man.
Jeff Darrow. Give Me Liberty, which doesn't get the credit it
Love that
dues
book.
And then there's one other book he's doing at that time that's brilliant. Oh, of course, Born Again.
Born
and Year
Again,
One.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, man.
Brilliant, right?
All of those in like a few years.
I know, and he
It's
just
insane.
sort of like super note to me, like Sin City's the beginning of the end. People hate me saying
I
that.
love Sin City, but I know what you mean.
The
I
first
know what you
book
mean.
is still like decent because he's like doing new stuff.
Right.
But then after that, he just gets lazy.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
The beer's got to come out. We're not done with that conversation. Yeah. And I was like saying to them, guys, can you like send me like the Camelite size, like the big paper? And they're like, yeah, we'll get it to you. They never did. It's one of my professional
that's too bad.
disappointments to have never gotten to work on this, but there's still time.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. Thanks for showing me that, man. That was
Yeah.
very cool.
I just showed Che my page from Give Me Liberty by Frank Miller and Dave Gibbons, which is huge.
It was huge and beautiful. I got to meet Dave Gibbons in Barcelona. I think it was in 2005 or 2006 or something like that. And he was the sweetest
He's a very
dude.
friendly guy.
He was such a cool guy, man.
He's a very
I
friendly
got to
guy.
like have a drink with him. I met his wife, and he was just such a sweet guy. Anyway,
And I really admire his craft, like especially like early on, because he just has such solid lines. Everything is very particular in
Yes.
place, you know.
he's like the opposite of Sienkiewicz. He was like very expressionistic and just crazy, like
Yeah.
like a Ralph Steadman or something. But I love how he's like, and Sienkiewicz is capable of being precise like that too. But you get somebody like Dave Gibbons and the kind of excesses that Sienkiewicz, who also got to meet during that Barcelona trip, the kind of excesses that Sienkiewicz indulges in, which I love. You'd never see that in Dave Gibbons. His work is from such a different aesthetic, but it's so beautiful, man. It's like
Yeah.
it's so I love it. He's such a solid draftsman. The guy's just a
That's it.
pure draftsman.
Draftsman is a
Which I
Correct.
love. He's all about that craft, man. It's great.
yeah. So comics.
Comics.
You took a break for a while, and
Yes.
then you've come back with
Taking many
Godhead.
breaks, yes.
So I want you to talk about Godhead. I don't really know what to ask about Godhead, so I'll let you talk, and then I'll jump in if I can.
Okay. Well, Godhead is Godhead.
Volume 1 just came out this year, right?
Yeah, Godhead Volume 1 came out in April of this year. It's on the road to becoming a television series, which I'm really excited about.
Is that locked in?
That is not locked in, but it's looking very good. Let's just leave it at that for now.
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I think that's going to happen, and if it does, that'd be great. If it
You
doesn't,
can't
whatever.
say which studio or...
It's a little too early to say
Okay.
right now.
All right.
I'm hoping things are going to get locked up in the next like short while, and then.
Are you just selling the rights, or do you want to like do creative control? over it?
No, I'm very lucky right now after like so many years of kind of beating my head against the wall in comic books and in the movie business. Finally like starting to like get some serious work finally coming my way, which is great. And so I've got enough stuff going on other than that I'm very happy. Since I had the great pleasure and privilege of getting to write and draw the book, it'd be thrilling for me to see what other creative minds would do with this material and expand it and reshape it. That's so exciting for me, man. So all I want is to be a consultant in the process, and if it goes to series, please allow me to write an episode or two. Other than that, guys, go to town, man.
Sounds
Do whatever
good.
the fuck you want. Have
Yeah.
fun with it.
So you're saying, so Godhead came out this year. How long were you working on it?
Okay, let me tell you the story of Godhead.
Yeah.
So I have been a lifelong science fiction fan since I was a kid. The whole reason that you and I are sitting here in your lovely home. By the way, this is the exact same paint color for my walls that I had in my apartment right before I got together with Diane. So this feels like sitting at home in a weird way.
I'd love to meet my Diane as a result of my color scheme.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's coming, man. But at any rate, yeah, it feels good. At any rate, so Godhead, I'd loved science fiction since I was a child, and I was just finishing off King. This was like 2003, I think, 2002. And I had not created anything from scratch for a long, long time. So I thought now's the time to like start coming up with something. So at the time, I was an illustrator. Part of my work, part of my day jobs was being an illustrator, magazine illustrator, and I was also working in newspapers and blah blah blah. At any rate, so in the illustration game, one of the things that you do to get work is you do a thing called a mailer. And so my thing at the time was I was going to put out a mailer to get work in the corporate environment, all right? Because there's a lot of money in that. And so I was going to put together a mailer, and it was going to be all corporate images, blah, blah, blah. At the same time, I was thinking, it's time to like create a new story. So I was going to, and it had been forever since I'd created my own thing. It's been like 7-8 years or something like that, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So I wanted to do this crime story called Morris Minor. It was going to be like a 1970s flavored urban blaxploitation taxi driver style crime thriller. And
there's part of that in Godhead.
Oh yeah, there totally is. So I was working on that, and I was working on the mailer at the same time. And then around the same time, 9/11 happened. And those three things started to kind of jumble in my mind. And at a certain point, the mailer idea kind of went away, and the crime thriller went away, and all of a sudden I had this class struggle scenario in my mind of this plutocrat and this fucking grunt who were coming to conflict with each other. And so I thought, okay, and when I thought about that, I thought this might be the right set of circumstances to like throw science fiction into there, like my opportunity. So, and it was also sort of like the paranoia of the 9/11 era and that sort of martial feeling that was in the air, gotta run off to war and stop the weapons of mass destruction and all that bullshit. So, so Godhead was born out of that. And I remember I had this scenario with the the CEO of the story and the ex-soldier of the story coming to conflict with each other, but I didn't have the actual story. And I was having a shower. I remember being in the shower one day and thinking, and the words machine that allows you to talk to God came into my mind. And I remember rejecting it because I didn't want to do like, I didn't want people to think I was like, hey, Tintin, I love Tintin. I didn't want people to think I was like doing like a Christian rock comic book or some shit like that, like some kind of like Christian indoctrination comic book. So I rejected it, but when you get an idea and sometimes it just implants itself in your brain. So after like rejecting it, I finally kind of gave into it. And so that's how the story was born. So this was around 2002, and my plan was to finish off King. So around the time I was finishing off the third volume of King, 2003. And my plan was to follow up King with Godhead. So, and it didn't work. I couldn't sell the goddamn thing. And I tried it with DC, almost got there, didn't happen. Tried it with Marvel, with the Epic at Marvel, almost got there, didn't happen. Dark Horse, same thing. Tor book, same thing. It's the same, just kept getting close, but no cigar.
What would they say that indicated it was close but no cigar?
Well, I always had an editor who went to bat for me, who like got it and would try to like kind of, what's the term that was used, running up the flagpole. I think that's the phrase I heard a bunch of times. And they would always get to the decision maker, and they'd always be like, well, science fiction doesn't sell, or I haven't heard of you before because I was not like well known at Marvel or DC. Since I haven't heard of you, I'm not convinced that your books will sell, or they just didn't get it. It was one of the above. So, and I didn't have a sufficient enough rep that they were willing to like take the chance. So, and even at Fantagraphics, they were reluctant to take it on because it had been so long for me to get the King finished.
Right. Just
due to financial circumstances.
Was it Gary Groth specifically you were talking to at Fantagraphics?
Yes, yeah, he's always been my point guy at Fantagraphics. So even he was just like, dude, I don't know if you're going to be able to finish this thing. And I was like, man.
So it wasn't that they didn't like it, it was just that they didn't think that you'd be able to finish it.
At Fantagraphics, that was the point, yeah. So I shelved the thing. But it was one of those things where I couldn't get the thing out of my head. It was always there. It was like a roadblock to
other stuff.
To other stuff, exactly.
Right.
So, and I got into the movie business at this point on a very low level, and I was working a day job to support it, and I was also going to school at that point. But there was a certain point, I was working my day job, and I just thought, fuck it, man, I'm just gonna do this thing. I'm just gonna get her done. even if I just wind up drawing the pages and they sit on the shelf, at least the thing will have been finished and I can think about something other than this. So I just started drawing it. And finally, after blah, 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 a lot of time, I finally got it set up at Fantagraphics and it came out. So the story about Godhead is basically a corporation has come up with a machine that will allow the user to talk to God. The God of Abraham, God of all the various gods, the three major gods.
Are you saying that these
Allah,
gods are different entities, or they're the same entity with different
basically
names?
it's the God of your choosing, the God of your faith.
Okay.
All right. If you're Jewish, then you know.
Sure.
Blah blah blah. If you're Muslim, if you're Christian, it's all your various gods. And
but I, as a Hindu, couldn't.
if you're Hindu, it's whatever deity that you
I get it.
that you take into your heart.
I get it.
You can is what will respond to you. We don't go into specifics. It's just basically God as a blanket statement.
What's happening in Godhead Volume 1 that I've read
Right.
is that all of their lab rats, which are human beings that they're dunking in the tank,
Yes.
are coming out very screwed up.
Yes.
So what are you trying to say with that?
Well, I don't want to be too specific or prescriptive because it's a vague enough concept that I sort of like the idea that a reader could bring to it what they will. But I guess if I if I was pinned, I guess I was saying that religion's fucked up, man. Like it messes people up. It's I see redeeming qualities to religion in that it's a very lonely world. We're here really by ourselves, and anything that we can bring into our lives that give it some order, that give it some meaning, give it a sense of clarity is all good. And being part of a community is very soothing and fortifying to the soul. But so those aspects of religion I take very seriously and have a lot of respect for. But then when we get into stuff like people like killing each other over differences in ideology, you're living a life that's not prescribed in my interpretation of whatever religious text we're discussing, therefore I need to take you out or hold you down in some way. That's fucked up, man. And these are the things that religion tends to invite in human beings. So I guess I'm just saying, like, if you're so compelled by religion that you would sacrifice your sanity to some fucked up experiment. I don't know. I'm just saying religion is bad, man.
Yeah.
Religion can be very
But
damaging to the soul.
it's like this experiment is sort of being held secretly
Yes.
on this island called Oceanus.
Well, it's not an island. It's like a floating submarine / fortress.
Yeah.
Facility, scientific facility.
Sorry. So the company that is funding this doesn't even really know what's happening there. So you've got this like very corporate world.
Yes.
And then you've got this kind of mystical sci-fi thing kind of thrown in. So I'm just kind of wondering how those two things go together, because I can see your antipathy to the corporate world kind of shining through, because I feel like I've seen that maybe in some of the other stuff.
Probably.
You know,
it's very easy to have antipathy to the corporate world,
especially when it's run by white people who don't really care about people who are poor or.
I think once you get up to a large corporate level, race and all that stuff becomes irrelevant. It's just about you are an impediment to my quarterly growth.
Right.
Anyway, whatever.
Yeah. So I could see some strands that I could sort of link, but I was just wondering how the religion thing, like, I was just wondering if you were in a new phase where you wanted to say something about religion that you hadn't really tackled before. What would that be? Or are you still kind of mining the same kind of, like you said, 70s kind of imperatives that you...
The only thing I want to say about religion is basically what we discussed a minute ago. And I mean, and the thing is, I'm not a religious person, but I come from strains of Christianity that were very prevalent when I was a child. What I'm trying to say is, all of my grandparents, and some of my relatives to this day were extremely Jesus focused when I was a child, and they were always trying to get me to go to the church, to read the Bible, to subscribe to the whole Christian ideology. And I was rejected it. That didn't jive with what was going on in my household or what was naturally in my head. But my grandparents were full on, man. So I've kind of got like that side of me that's got that religious stuff just the attempt to force it into my brain from childhood, and I've got the other side that rejects it. So I guess I'm just trying to work out some of my childhood feelings about religion.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, it sounds like you're an atheist.
I am an atheist, but the thing is, though, maybe I'm an agnostic. I'm not sure. I'm the guy that doesn't know and will not say for sure. Like, maybe there is something else out there.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, in the world of your comic book, in the world of Godhead, is there a God on the other side that these scientists just can't get through to, or is there not?
I don't know.
Are they just messing around in the human brain and warping their subjects?
You tell me. Don't know, man.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It reminds me of this movie, which didn't really pan out in terms of the idea, but I remember it came out in the mid-90s, and it had Sam Neill, and it was a Wim Wenders film, but the premise of it was there was this machine where it could record people's dreams.
Oh, you're not talking about Dreamscape. Not no. Dreamscape, Brainstorm. You're not talking about Brainstorm, right?
I forget the exact title, but it's something like, once again, it's the 40s memory, but it's something like something at the end of the world or something. Anyway, just the movie itself didn't really...
Home at the end of the world? I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. But just that idea that you could have this technology that was interfering with something so personal and spiritual just really appealed to me. So your idea kind of reminded me of that. But, do you want another beer?
I would definitely take another beer.
So I was wondering, like, what are your plans for Volume 2 and moving forward? I mean, is Gary Groth happy with what you've done? And
yeah, he seemed happy with it.
Yeah?
Yeah, my plans are just to find the time to get the book done. The unfortunate thing is there is no money to be had from the production of it. It's thank you so much. Yeah. It's strictly just for the love of telling the story that I'm doing it. I'm sure as hell not making any money off the thing. Yeah, he'd be happy with it. In the second, well, I don't really want to say what's going to happen in the second half. Let's just say that it's going to be more action focused than the first half was.
Okay, and you say there's no money to be made. Is that because it's just not selling?
Dude, it's comics, man. The only time it's possible to make money in indie comics is if you get like an extraordinary word of mouth success.
Yeah.
Like
and libraries buy it or something?
Yeah, no. Actually, libraries are a great source of income because you get a thing called public lending right.
Sure.
But unless you get something like a success like what's that fucking book called? It's a beautiful book that Fantagraphics did recently. Something Monsters.
Yeah, it won an Eisner.
Yeah,
Emil Ferris's book.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful book.
Unless you get like monsters or something.
My favorite things are monsters.
Monsters.
Exactly. It's a gorgeous piece of work. And yeah, if you get like something like that, which a lot of people talk about, and like manage to sell like based on that, then absolutely you can make a few bucks. I'm sure she'll make a few dollars in royalties. Plus her movie she sold the movie rights, and if that gets made, I'm sure she'll clean up doing that. But for the most part, telling indie comics there's no money in it, dude. There's no money.
So how do you convince somebody like Gary Groth, who's reportedly is not an easy person to deal with, to go with your book?
Dude, I don't know what to tell you, man. I got involved with Gary when I was 19.
Yeah.
We have never had a day when we didn't get along.
Sure.
I think he's great. I can understand why people kind of think he's an asshole. Like,
I think it's ironic,
but I think he's great.
That you pissed off these other people early in your career, but with Gary Groth, somehow you can't do no wrong.
Well, we're both douchebags. So.
Your contours just match.
Exactly.
You recognize a kindred spirit.
Assholes gravitate to assholes.
But what's the process of working with Gary like? Does he just give you free reign to draw whatever you want?
Sure. Gary's not interested in like being your editor in the sense that he's going to control what you do or try to put his stamp on things. Yeah. His stamp is in the fact that he finds your work compelling to some degree, and he wants to put it under his banner. But other than that, his whole ethos is you're the cartoonist, man. You do the work.
Apparently, Chris Oliveros is like that too with Drawn and Quarterly.
Wouldn't know.
He just said, that's what I heard, that like he just believed, like once he took a creator on, that they had enough expertise, understanding, awareness to know how to edit themselves.
You're not the cartoonist. If you're an editor, you're not doing the book. Like, you hired these people, you contracted them, let's put it that way, because of their work. So let them do what they do.
Sure.
You know, I get it if it's a big corporate entity like Marvel or DC, and they've got certain IP that they need to massage and service and all that bullshit. I get that, man. You're gonna have more
By
say
IP,
over Batman. Well, I'm saying I can't just come in and I think I have a story that's gonna be great.
Intellectual property.
Where Batman, intellectual property, where Batman's gonna be a porn star. What do you think about that? Go fuck myself, and understandably so. I get that, but so their goals are different. But for something like Fantagraphics, where it's basically a boutique publisher, they're not about IP per se. They're about auteurs, I guess, for lack of a better word. So their goals are different. They're not gonna, generally speaking, be about. But you know, as I'm saying that, I'm remembering some of the other editors that I've worked with over in smaller companies with a similar philosophy supposedly to Fantagraphics books, who've been very hands-on in terms of like specific points in their story. So I guess that doesn't hold true for everybody. Maybe that's more or less more of a Fantagraphics thing or Fantagraphics and DP thing than normal.
So you're saying Volume 2 is going to be more action-oriented.
Yes.
Do you have a deadline for it? Is it the last volume?
Yeah, there's only going to be the 2. Do I have a deadline? As soon as possible. My time has been shrunk to nothing, though, unfortunately, right now.
Because you're doing like 4 different things. Right?
I'm working on a bunch of stuff right now, so it's gonna be a while. But I'm in my perfect world, it'd be like a year from now. I'd deliver, like, finish drawing the last page.
Okay.
I doubt it, though.
And so, what are you giving yourself? Something like 1 page every 3 days or something?
I try to have a page finished like 1 per week. That's like the best that I could do at this particular point.
Yeah.
I'd love for it to be like 5 a week or at least 4 a week, but I don't have the time for that right now.
Yeah. So some of these other things that you're talking about, I want to ask you about the film that you got the telefilm funding for that you can talk about. I'm sure. We got funding for a movie called Le Corbeau. Telefilm used to have a thing called the micro budget program. That's not the right name, but that's basically what it was. It was a micro budget, and in a micro budget in Canada, budget was like $65,000, I think it was. So they reformed the micro budget program, and now it's called the Talent to Watch program. And they upped the money that they give each filmmaker $225,000. So you're still basically getting a pittance, but you're getting $125,000 for your first film that you didn't have to raise yourself, that you don't have to pay back. I think that's great.
That's amazing.
That's
dude.
a doubling of their previous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're thrilled. We were just
Is
so
this your
excited.
first time getting telephone funding?
Yes, this is my first time getting funding for any film. The closest we got to funding for a film before this was a short film that we made for one of the people that we went to school with. And we she gave us a budget of $2,000, and we were like, $2,000, like that's $2,000. We didn't have to raise ourselves. We were thrilled, man.
Yeah.
It was funny because I remember being up on set on that movie. It was a movie called Teeth Marks, and I think you can find it on my Instagram if anybody's interested. You can find like a little clip of it. And I remember we were on set. We had like our whole crew from school. We were just so fucking thrilled and we got a great setup and everything. And we were like, what would it be like if like we were to get like, I don't know, $100,000 to make a movie? We were just so chuffed by that idea. So when we found out that we got like the 125, dude, man, it was like we scored. We're living the dream, man.
So is this totally your concept, or is it
Yes.
you working with somebody? Or?
Yeah, this is I'm working with you never make a movie alone. You're always working with somebody. But the reason this came about is, so I wrote this script, Le Corbeau, when I was in film school, and
Which means what in French?
this means the crow.
I thought it
It's
was
basically
the
the crow.
Yeah.
And I wrote this in school in 2011 or 2012.
So you went to
or something
film
like
school?
that. I went to 2 film schools. I went to the Toronto Film School, and then I went to near the Imperial, and then I went to that we both love, and then I went to Sheridan College as well.
The 4-year film program?
That was no, I didn't go for the 4-year film program. I went to the IATSE camera training program.
Gotcha.
And that's how I got in. That's one of the reasons I got into IATSE later on. And Yeah, so I wrote this in school, and then it was something that I showed to a bunch of people. Part of film school is making contacts, so I was showing the fucking thing to everybody. And
this was a feature screenplay.
Feature screenplay.
100 pages?
I think it's 82 pages.
Okay.
The script. It's a story about a safecracker, has a heart condition, comes to Toronto from Spain. He's Nigerian born, raised in France, living in Spain. It's a total world picture. Comes to Toronto, meets people from other parts of the world to do a job. The job goes well. He intuits, you know what, I shouldn't say anything more. Let's just say that the dude winds up on the run for his life, and it's like a 24-hour action-adventure safe-cracking movie.
Nice.
All right. So it's going to be fun.
It's not a heist movie, though.
Oh, there's a heist in it.
There's a heist in it.
It's a chase movie, but there's a heist in the beginning, and then it evolves into a chase movie.
Got it.
And it's about family, and it's about the cultures of the world coming into conflict with each other, and it's gonna be a fun movie, man. I'm really excited about it.
So what's your timeline on this?
So we've got 18 months to deliver a finished film. We're still trying to raise some more financing on the thing. It's $125,000. While fantastic, this script's a little ambitious for $125,000.
So what do you need for this film?
Well, take whatever we can get, but we're trying to raise. Well, the thing is actually, I think Telefilm has a cap on how much money they want you to spend on your movie. So we're trying to raise $325,000.
Okay, so
I think maybe up to 400. But we don't want to go too much, because the whole point of the money was to like make your first film, but make some mistakes, and you know what I mean, like without worrying so much about it. So
do you have a date to start shooting? Have you scouted locations?
No, we're just in the. We have to do all the paperwork stuff, all the producer stuff that they have to do before you can actually like start spending the money. So my producer. Oh, so that's where I was going. So I showed it to everybody at school. One of my teachers, I showed it to him. He was the guy that, to make a very long story short, he's the one who actually had to connect with Telefilm, who got us the cash. And so through his connect with Telefilm, and also just some of the work that I had done that they had seen and had some appreciation for, that's what got us the money. So we've got 18 months to deliver the movie. We're hoping to start shooting. We're trying to figure out our dates right now. It's either going to be this coming October or next April, and then we're just going to be frantically into just making the thing and getting it. So we've got, I think, till November, I want to say, of 2019, 2012, something like that.
And then more exterior locations, or more on a sound stage, or?
It's going to be. That's a good question. Maybe half and half. A lot of it takes place outside.
Okay.
There's a lot of him running outside, and there's a big scene in a cornfield and
That'll
on the
be
city
interesting to
streets.
get some of those permits, I think. And
yeah. Well, I think we're gonna our budget. We're gonna have to guerrilla a whole lot of stuff, man. Because we've got planes and we've got cars crashing, and
wow,
it's gonna be like a real exercise in trying to make a zero budget movie look like a non-zero budget movie.
Kind of like the first Terminator.
Yeah, man, exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of my favorite stories. That's one of my favorite movies. One of my favorite stories about that movie is how they created one shot. There was I think the movie was $4 million. I want to say, I could be wrong about that budget, but I think it was $4 million. It's not a huge budget, but it's still a lot of money as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And but they had a one shot where they needed to show like the end of the Terminator, so they like had this like cheap like eyepiece, and they had this like the cheap this like red light that they could like dial on and off, and then they had this like cheap piece of tinfoil that they wrapped around the eye to like make it look like the skull, and then they put it between two pieces of foam core to simulate a metal press. And then a dude like had cigarette smoke, and he was blowing the cigarette smoke into the shot. And like the shot cost like $4, but it was like, but when you watch it, it's epic.
Yeah.
That's what I love about movies, that it's all smoke and mirrors, but when you see it, it's like a whole world, man. Yeah. That's incredible. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Well, good luck and congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Do you want to talk about? I know you sort of talked a little bit about maybe Godhead being adapted, but do you want to talk at all about the HBO thing we discussed? Or?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. It's still early yet, but they gave me the go-ahead if I wanted to like talk a little bit about it, I can do
Cool.
that.
Tell us.
Sure. So I'm working with Time Warner on a show that we don't have a buyer for it yet. We're still in the development phase, so we'll see where it goes. So I'm working with these people at Time Warner to create a show called 1033. So 1033 is about a small group of Texas law enforcement officers. One of them is a SWAT member. Another one is just like a local beat cop who become part of a recruitment program in Israel to be taught by the IDF occupational tactics, basically. And this is a training that they bring back home to the United States and then employ on city streets, which aren't designed for that kind of police mentality. And it's kind of discusses, it kind of reflects a bit on just the militarization of the police and how we get to a state where, you have like unarmed black people are just getting like capped by the cops willy-nilly, and how it's like not a big deal. And it's never been a big deal. But how what's going on in terms of the escalation in the police services and how that's affecting just life on the streets. And so the name 1033 comes from Department of Defense. I forget what they call it. It's basically like an act that they put together every year, like a defense act, and it talks about, and there's a section in it called 1033, and basically that allows the military to, I'm sure you know about 1033, it allows them to like sell like excess military like weaponry to like local law enforcement agencies. So
I didn't know about it, but please go on.
Absolutely. So you've got like military style equipment
Sure.
on fucking city streets where it's basically got no place being. And
I could be wrong, but I think Miller even makes a reference to that in The Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, is it in Dark Knight Returns? Really?
Yeah, it's sort of like not allowed in Dark Knight Returns, but there's a
I doubt he would have done that because it wasn't until 2000. It was until
there's
later.
a general who kills himself.
Yeah.
When because the mutants are using this stuff, and then
Right.
Miller confronts him. I'll find the page, but you keep.
I know the page that you're talking about.
Do you
I know
know?
the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been 1033 if only because that
It's
didn't come
before the
into
time.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
way before the time. Not way before, but before
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time. But I know what you're talking about. Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of shades of that for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's and so the number the idea is that sort of like is sort of thematic shorthand for what's going on with these characters in the
Got it.
story. So yeah, so that's what we're working on.
And do you have a timeline for that? Like when
I
you
do not.
begin production?
I
If they let you talk about it, does that mean that you've been greenlit?
God no, good God no. Right now we're in the development phase.
Okay.
All right. So
Are you part of their program where they take a certain number of people and then?
yeah, they have development programs where they like kind of bring in talents from outside the television industry, traditional television industry, and if they have a little bit of talent, they can exploit it to their end. So yeah, man.
Are you being mentored by anybody? for that
I'm
purpose?
not being mentored specifically, but there's like a development executive who I've been working with who
I
like
see.
brought me in, and he's like
I see.
giving me guidance. But yeah, it's been going really good so far. So right now we're just in the development phase, just like getting a pitch together, whole pitch package together, and then once that's finished and approved, then hopefully we'll go to the proof of concept stage. And if that goes successfully, then we can start taking it out to whomever. It's got a list of people that I don't want to get into that right now. So yeah.
With the news of the shooter yesterday in Greektown in Toronto,
Sorry.
I thought about your project, and not that there's really any particular correlation between them, but just because I knew I'd be meeting you today, and then, just the idea of a whole bunch of police presence that's being beefed up in the city, and yet not being able to do anything about, somebody who goes off with a semi-automatic.
Well, what can you do though? If like some lone nut decides, and if you had 1,000, if everybody on the street was a cop,
Yeah.
there were no citizens, it was only cops. You still can't predict that.
That's right,
that one
because like a
person.
couple of weeks ago they had an alert for this area, right around here, the Sky Dome and the Sky
Right.
Tower. Nothing came of it, but they didn't say what. So I was wondering if it was this, if somehow somebody had said, somebody's going to shoot up a bunch of people. I mean, do you have any thoughts about it? Everybody else seems to be sounding off on it. Today.
It's interesting. It's like, one of the themes of the show is we're talking about, I'm trying to figure out how to say it without like giving too much about what the meat of the show is. But basically, preparing people for urban warfare, so-called like overseas style urban warfare in the United States, in North America, and just preparing people for the reality of martial law. I remember reading around the time that the Boston bombing came about, that the Boston Marathon bombing, that one of the things that was in the air was they were sort of happy that went down because it allowed them to put Boston on lockdown, just for the sake of, I'm not saying these guys were non-threatening, but for the sake of two dudes who like set out the bomb, the entire city was put on lockdown, a sort of mini version of martial law until they found those guys. And I was sort of have the feeling in post 9/11 North America that the powers that are would like nothing more than to put us all on lockdown at all times. So when something like a mass shooting or some idiot like last night going off in Greektown, it's almost like kind of feeding into whatever it is that they're seeding in the environment. Like this kind of thing allows us to like exert more control over the populace. We're doing this in your name, guys. We're trying to protect you.
Oh, sure.
So every time I see a dude like that, I kind of feel like, dude, I guess this is what he wants, though. Like you're.
Well, we don't really know.
You're not just killing the people,
wants,
exactly. But you're feeding into a greater thing, man.
It could be an incel thing. That's the first thing that crossed my mind.
Sure.
Because the two victims are female, right?
Right.
But you kind of, it's the common practice. Like you have a serial killer, or you have this or you have that. You kind of scapegoat them and you say this is evil. Right, evil's always around, but you never do anything to change whatever the circumstances are in society that's created this.
And I love that it's a white guy, so it's just some like weird random incident. But had he been brown, for example, it would have been terrorism, man.
I was just thanking myself that it wasn't somebody.
It would have been a terrorist incident that went down instead of just a random lone shooter.
I know.
Which I find kind of disgusting. But.
Yeah. So, do you have any other projects you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
There's some other stuff going on, but that's probably enough for the time being, I think.
Yeah. So
I just find it funny in that, I'm very grateful for a little bit of opportunity that's come my way over the years, but I just find it so funny that it's everything except, I was saying to you before, everything except for the comic book industry has kind of reached out and...
But it might not be you, it might be the comic book industry itself. Like you say, it likes certain stars, but even those stars, like, once they're not really... It's like, what have you done for me lately? Kind of thing,
I guess.
I don't know, like, I don't know whoever said it, but comics will break your heart, right? Like, it's just...
Whoever said it was right.
Yeah, it's good that you have these other irons in the fire. They're all very exciting.
Yeah.
I think.
Follow Ho Chi Anderson on Instagram at HOCHE Anderson with an O, or on Tumblr at officialhochianderson.tumblr.com. Godhead and much of Anderson's other work is published by Fantagraphics. Here at deconstructingcomics.com, we produce Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Polls. If you like our shows and want to support them, pledge at patreon.com/deconcomics. Help us make our next goal and unlock more vintage episodes. Also, please help us get noticed by reviewing us on Apple or any other podcast source. Tell the world why you enjoy Deconstructing Comics. We really need more iTunes reviews, so if you're listening to this, please give us a star rating and a short review. Even if it's just a sentence, let others know why they should choose this podcast over the buttload of other podcasts out there. Another way to show your appreciation is simply to write to us. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or contact us through social media. Find all the links on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. We're also on the Comics Podcast Network at comicspodcasts.com. and on comiccon.com, where our new episodes usually go up on the Friday before they appear in our feed. Our theme is from bensound.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. We're aiming to be back on August 23rd if we can get the darn podcast recorded in time. This coming Thursday on To the Bat Polls, a discussion of the 1960s Batman fanzine, Batmania. It launched simultaneously with the New Look Batman comics of 1964, and happened to be around as the 66 show came out. How did the fans of the time react to the show? Listen to the Bat Polls in its own podcast feed on Apple Podcasts or other podcast apps, or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com. Next week on this show, we check in with some old friends. Matt Kint talks about his recent Kickstarter project for an audio comic that ties in with mind management. And Jason McNamara joins me to review Love Letters to Jane's World, a 20th anniversary collection of Paige Braddock's Eisner-nominated strip, Jane's World. That's next Monday. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.